made sense.
It
So
seems to me, Rick, that the UFC, Joe Silva, Dana White, they really seem to appreciate guys who. I mean, to me, there's a couple of things that just make you, a perfect prospect for UFC, which is exciting fights. You've never been stopped, and also the ability to really look forward like that. I mean, obviously, anybody can get in there and say, I want, GSP next, or I want the champion, or whatever. But when a guy really takes a careful look at something and says, okay, I'm being interviewed as the winner by Joe Rogan right now, and you know what I think would be a really exciting fight is this fight. We saw the same thing Brian Stands on this card. I mean, we saw him do that with Chris Lieben. We saw him attempt to do it with Vanderlei Silva. It seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the UFC really has an appreciation for fighters who have that type of vision for their own careers.
yeah, and I mean, you got to think about it. If somebody's going into a fight wanting to fight somebody else, it's going to be a better fight. I
Yeah.
mean, if the want is there and the desire to fight somebody is there, it's going to be a better show. And I definitely think the UFC takes that into consideration because they want to put on the best fights possible.
Now, Rick, this I think certainly has fight of the night possibilities attached to it. You are known as a guy who just goes in there guns blazing. Thiago Alves, of course, one of the more devastating strikers in the welterweight division. Now, to me, it seems like sometimes when you get a matchup like that, there are other intangibles that come into play. Maybe leg kicks, that sort of thing. Is that anything in particular that you train for, knowing that if you're going toe to toe with Alves and he's maybe feeling your power, that he may try to stave you off with his leg kicks?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, that's one of his biggest weapons is his leg kicks. And if I were to go into this camp and not trained to defend leg kicks or capitalize off the leg kicks, I'd be pretty insane. So, yeah, definitely. If I'm putting the pressure on him, he's gonna want to try and slow my pressure down by doing some damage to my legs and making it hard for me to move.
No,
But going through camp, I've been training for it.
Now, at that point, do you maybe look to a little bit more of your wrestling base? I mean, because of your really exciting fights in the UFC, where fists have been flying, we haven't maybe seen so much of your wrestling base. Thiago Alves has not always had great success against wrestlers. There's 2 losses against John Fitch, GSP, of course. So it seems like possibly we could maybe see more of that from you in this fight than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. But then again, you got to think he's also had awesome performances against other good wrestlers too. I mean, he beat Hughes and Josh Koscheck as well. But I mean, with Fitch and St. Pierre, their focus was more on wrestling and not the striking. So. I mean, just get more.
You mentioned Tiago's win over Matt Hughes, and I will always remember that fight as Alves has had problems with weight cuts in the past, and I'll always kind of remember that fight as seeing him come in the cage and thinking, geez, Matt Hughes is fighting a really large middleweight. And I thought about that because in the Countdown show, you talked about a prior experience in one of the independent promotions where you were booked to fight a middleweight, and the guy came in at what'd you say, 220?
Oh, it was my first fight. Yeah, I was booked to fight at 185, and the guy come in and was weighing like 223 pounds, and I ended up not fighting that guy, but I fought another guy at like 210 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah, he. I mean, is that something? I realize it's his problem, not yours. But in terms of the weight cut that Thiago Alves has dealt with, it's got to be a bit of a distraction for an opponent if you get down to the day of the weigh-in and there's some issue, something like that. Has that crossed your mind at all, given his history with the problem with weight cuts?
I don't know. He seemed like he come into his last fight, pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's got a decent science down to making the weight. So. I mean, it could happen, but I don't think it's very likely. I think he's going to come in on point this fight.
Now, you trained with Johnny Hendricks for this fight, your former opponent. Have there been, I mean, you've been in the game long enough now. Are there other examples of former opponents of yours that you've, ended up, if not getting friendly with, at least, working with and training with?
No, I mean, I've talked to Brian Foster quite a bit, and haven't trained with him, but really it's like the opportunities to train with Hendricks arose, and we wanted to go down and check out his team and stuff down there in Texas, and it's like having the opportunity to train with him, like, just kind of worked out in our favor because we had to come up here for the summit meeting and stuff too, about a month ago, and it worked out. It worked out pretty good.
Now, obviously, Rick Story joining us. You'll see him on the main card Saturday night, UFC 130, headlined by Rampage Jackson against Matt Hamill on pay-per-view. Another thing you've been known for, Rick, in the UFC is frequency of fights. Now, I realize that this is the biggest fight of your career to prepare for, but I was thinking for it may not be so much a big deal for another fighter, but for Rick Story, a December to May layoff, that's got to feel like a pretty long period of time compared to what you're used to.
Yeah, it's a pretty long time. When there's quite a bit of time in between fights, there's always that tendency to want to kind of slack off and not train hard. But I have a pretty good work ethic, and I think that I got a lot better in between my last fight and this fight. And time off's not always bad, but I do like fighting frequently, just because it keeps you sharp, keeps you fresh.
Now, it is Memorial Day weekend. I talked to Brian Stan on the show yesterday, and, of course, he's got an extensive military background. You yourself are in the National Guard, and following you on Twitter, I see that that's still I guess you're still in the reserves. That's something you get called back to do from time to time? How does that work?
Yeah, actually, I was in the Army National Guard, and I'm not in it anymore. I just got done in April, actually.
Oh, okay.
But I was in for 8 years. I wasn't in to the extent and as Brian Stan, but I'd never been deployed or anything, but it still means a lot to be able to fight on Memorial Day weekend, though.
Yeah. You can follow Rick on Twitter at Rick_Story. That's you, right? That's you officially. Is that
Correct.
Your Twitter, right? And also Rick's fight camp and company, BraveLegion.com. I guess this is making you part-time business owner now too, right?
Yeah. It keeps my plate pretty full.
Right on. Well, listen, man, best of luck in there against the Pitbull, Thiago Alves. Always exciting to see him appear on an undercard, and especially when he's got a really game opponent, like you. I think that this guaranteed to be on the main card of a pay-per-view is going to make a lot of UFC fans more familiar with you than they may have been up to this point. So we're looking for good things for you in the future, and I really appreciate the time, man, and we'll look forward to talking to you again.
All right, I think a lot too.
And